When I was 10 years old, my brother and I were home alone one night while my parents went out for a few hours. We were both sitting in the living room, relaxing, when all of a sudden we hear a barely audible voice from down the hall. We both just looked at each other and froze, making sure we had both heard it, but we were too scared to check it out. A couple minutes of silence went by, then suddenly we heard it again, only this time we heard it more clearly because we were paying more attention. It was a voice, but there was something weird about the way it sounded, and we couldn't understand it, almost like it was speaking some kind of gibberish. My brother got up and stepped into the hallway. I reluctantly followed. "Hello?" he called out after a moment of listening for movement. Nothing. We carefully walked further down the hallway to where we had heard it and looked around. No signs of anyone. We looked around a bit more and then started to walk back into the living room when suddenly we heard it again right behind us, making me jump. But we realized it didn't sound like a person talking inside the house. It almost like it was coming out of a walkie-talkie or something, like when there aren't any low or high frequencies in a sound, just the staticity, distorted mids, and still, it was speaking in some weird language I couldn't place. We looked at each other, now more puzzled than scared, but my kid brain started coming up with all sorts of creepy explanations. Maybe there is someone in the house, but they left their walkie-talkie out somewhere and an accomplice was communicating with them from outside, asking if we were alone so they could come in and sack the place. We kept looking around the area and were completely stumped as to what was producing the sound when it happened again, and we realized it was coming from directly above where we were standing. We looked up and saw the fire alarm with a small flashing red light. It was trying to tell us to change the battery, but the language was set to French. I was working graveyard shift alone, as I've done many nights before. Didn't get my break until very late in my shift because there had been an emergency. So I head out to the lobby where they have some more comfortable seats and start watching a little YouTube. I work 12-hour shifts and it's not uncommon for me to take a nap, so I'm feeling a little sleepy. That is, right up until I hear the elevator from around the corner ding and listen to the doors open. Suddenly wide awake, I sit there in silence until the doors close again. Was it a glitch with the elevator? There's no one else that works in the building at these hours. Just about the time I start to relax, the elevator does it again. This time I can hear a faint voice. I can't see into the elevator from where I'm sitting, and I'm now straight up hoping that security is messing with me because I don't want to consider the alternatives. So I get up and walk over to the door. The elevator call button was malfunctioning and security thought I was stuck, so they were sending it to multiple floors and trying to talk over the intercom. I fell asleep and woke up to the door being bashed in and doorbell being smashed. In my sleepiness, I thought it was my sister after forgetting her key after taking the dog out. I didn't realize it was like 2/3 a.m. I get up and I think nobody is getting up to let her in. I go down and open the door, and this barely dressed girl falls in on top of me. I grab her and shove her out the door, out of the porch and into the arms of a guy standing in our front garden. I blink and look at them and the taxi's still waiting outside. The girl is completely fuck drunk and the guy is so confused. I tell him wrong house and he proceeds to drag the girl over the low garden wall. We had a small gate and they didn't seem to use it, and get into the taxi and leave. To this day my dad always brings it up. He thinks they were scoping out the place to rob the place and that was their cover to get someone to open the door. Me being an 8-year-old kid sleeping peacefully. Don't know why, but I woke up. It was weird. No sounds, no movement, everyone was asleep and there was silent. Wasn't dreaming at all. Just woke up out of the blue. Suddenly I hear footsteps outside my window and someone started knocking on the window. The window had wooden doors at that time. I turn the lights on. I'm scared shitless. I stared at the window and out of nothing this motherfucker starts doing ghost sounds going UUHHHHHH. I let the biggest dad ever and my father just jumped off bed and I hear someone running. My dad went outside with a baseball bat. No one was there. My neighborhood had some abandoned houses where junkies would usually occupy. Guess he was checking if someone was in the house because a few years later we had 2 occasions where 2 guys tried to enter our house. One was scared by a random street cleaner, bless him, and the other one got his ass kicked by my mother. Music boxes are creepy as fuck. When I was probably around 13, my cousin and I decided to play with an Ouija board. I lived with my grandparents and my room was in the attic. There were a bunch of built-in bookcases that housed miscellaneous shit that I never bothered to clear out when I moved into the room. One of the things on the bookcase was my grandmother's music box. It was a small, plain box, and when you opened it, a ballerina would twirl around with the music. But it was so old that it didn't work anymore. For years I'd pick it up from time to time and open it, but the music wouldn't play and the ballerina wouldn't move. Anyway, my cousin and I, we decided we'd try to contact spirits with the Ouija board, just fucking around like kids do because we were bored. So we sat Indian style on the floor with the board between us and asked, "Are there any spirits here with us?" There was no answer. If there was, we wouldn't have known because we were both kind of pushing the planchette around trying to freak each other out, just laughing and fucking around. We may have asked a few more questions and then we decided to get serious. We swore to each other neither of us would move a piece. No more laughing. We'd try to be reverent and we'd ask another question. So we ask, "If there's a spirit here with us right now, can you give us a sign?" All of a sudden, sitting 5 feet away from us on the bookcase, my grandmother's closed music box starts playing music. My cousin and I looked towards the music box, looked at each other, screamed at the top of our lungs, and booked it the fuck out of my room and down the stairs. I don't remember anything weird happening in the days that followed, but I was so afraid to be in my room alone for a long time after. To this day, it's probably the creepiest, most unexplainable things that has happened to either of us. We will never forget it. A few years ago, I think I was maybe 18, I was in a really bad situation as far as living goes, and I like to take really long walks out at night. One night, I was in a field at about 3 a.m. and saw an owl perched atop a dead tree. It had me for a good minute and a half before taking off. Owls have always made me uneasy, so I decided to head home. On the way back, and on the darkest road possible, 2 dogs came up to the street from my right. At first I thought they were wolves. They really looked it, but one was solid black, the other solid white. They didn't look at me, and they didn't approach me. They just stood at the edge of the road as I walked by. For some reason, I was terrified. I looked straight ahead as well. After I passed, they started walking across the street behind me and just kept going. Now I know this doesn't sound scary to most people, but my late father and I are Chickamauga Cherokees, and it's very reminiscent of an old story he'd once told me about. More of an eye-opener than a suspenseful fright, but I don't remember ever being that scared before or after that.